Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have a truly inspiring story for you. It's about a man who changed the way we understand the world, a man whose curiosity never stopped, even when everyone around him told him to give up. This is the story of Albert Einstein, the boy who asked too many questions. So, sit back, relax, and listen carefully, because this story might change the way you think about learning, curiosity, and success. Albert Einstein was born on March 14th, 1879, in Ulm, Germany. He was a quiet child. Too quiet, in fact. While other kids laughed, cried, and shouted, Albert often sat in silence, just watching the world around him. His parents, Hermann and Pauline Einstein, sometimes worried. When Albert was 3 years old, his baby sister, Maya, was born. Everyone expected him to be excited, to talk to her, to play. But Albert said nothing. He simply looked at her for a long moment and then whispered softly, "Where are her wheels?" That strange question confused everyone. But that was Albert, curious, different, and always wondering. He didn't speak clearly until he was around 4 years old. His parents thought something might be wrong with him. But when he finally spoke, he surprised them with a full sentence. He didn't learn to talk word by word, like most kids. It was as if he had been thinking for years. And when he finally opened his mouth, all the words came at once. Albert's father ran an electrical business, and his mother loved music. She often played the piano for him, and Albert loved those moments. He would sit beside her, listening carefully, lost in the sound. Even as a child, he could feel patterns, rhythm, harmony, repetition. He didn't know it yet, but that same sense of pattern would one day help him understand the universe. When Albert was about 5 years old, he got sick and had to stay in bed for several days. To cheer him up, his father brought him a small gift, a pocket compass. Albert held it in his hands and looked at the tiny needle that always pointed north. He turned it this way and that, but the needle refused to move. He was amazed. Something invisible was controlling that needle. What could it be? He wondered. He didn't see any strings or magnets. Nothing was touching it. Yet it moved, always in the same direction. That compass changed everything. It made him realize that there were forces in the world that couldn't be seen but still had power. That small moment would stay in his memory forever. Years later, when he became a scientist, he would remember that compass and the mystery that first awakened his curiosity. Albert started school when he was 6, but school was not a happy place for him. He found the lessons boring, the rules strict, and the teachers cold. They wanted him to memorize facts, repeat answers, and never ask too many questions. But Albert always had questions. Too many questions. Why is the sky blue? How does light travel? What makes the stars shine? His teachers didn't like that. They thought he was being rude or lazy. One teacher even said, "Einstein, you'll never amount to anything." Albert didn't argue. He wasn't good at following orders, but he was good at thinking. When lessons ended, he walked home with a head full of ideas. Ideas about light, color, sound, and the strange patterns of nature. He loved reading science books at home. While other boys played outside, Albert sat in his room, reading quietly. Sometimes he forgot to eat or sleep. He just wanted to understand the why behind everything. As he grew older, Albert began to hate the strict discipline of the German schools. Teachers yelled at students for speaking without permission. Rules had to be followed exactly. Albert couldn't stand that. He believed learning should be about discovery, not obedience. One day, when a teacher told him to stop asking questions, Albert stood up and walked out. He never forgot that feeling, the frustration of being told to stop thinking. In his mind, he promised himself he would never stop asking questions, no matter what others said. When Albert was around 10 years old, something wonderful happened. His parents invited a family friend to dinner, a young medical student named Max Talmud. Max noticed Albert's bright eyes and curious mind. He started bringing books for the boy to read. Science books, philosophy books, even math books far above his age. Every week, Max came to dinner. And every week, Albert had new questions, new thoughts, new discoveries. Within a few years, Max realized that Albert had gone far beyond what he could teach. The student had surpassed the teacher. By the time Albert was a teenager, his family had moved to Italy. His father's business had failed, and they were struggling with money. Albert stayed behind in Munich to finish school, but he was miserable. He hated the military-style discipline of his teachers. So, at 15, he made a bold decision. He left school without graduating and joined his family in Italy. He wandered through the streets of Milan, thinking about the future. He didn't want to live by rules. He wanted to live by ideas. After some time, he decided to continue his education in Switzerland, where schools were more open-minded. There, he studied at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. He wasn't the best student in class. He often skipped lectures and studied on his own, but he learned deeply. He preferred understanding concepts rather than memorizing formulas. His professors didn't always appreciate his independence. One of them even refused to write him a recommendation letter after graduation. So Einstein couldn't get a teaching job. He ended up working in a patent office, reviewing inventions and technical documents. In the quiet of the Swiss patent office, Einstein found peace. There were no teachers, no exams, no pressure, just time. Time to think. Every day he examined inventions, electrical devices, machines, engines. He learned how things worked, how people turned ideas into reality. But during his free hours, his mind wandered. He began thinking about light again. He imagined himself riding a beam of light through space. What would he see? Would time slow down? Would colors change? He filled notebooks with calculations, questions, and dreams. His wife, Mileva, often found him lost in thought, staring at nothing for hours. But in his mind, he was exploring the universe. Then came 1905, Einstein's miracle year. In that single year, while still working full-time at the patent office, he published 4 groundbreaking papers. Each one changed the world of physics forever. One explained how light behaves like both waves and particles. Another introduced the idea of molecules moving randomly in liquids. The third explained how to measure the size of atoms. And the fourth, the most famous, introduced a simple but powerful equation: E equals mc squared. That equation showed that energy and matter are 2 sides of the same coin. It became one of the most famous formulas in history. Suddenly, the quiet clerk from the patent office became a celebrity in the world of science. He was offered teaching positions, awards, and invitations to conferences. But Einstein stayed humble. He continued to dress simply, speak softly, and ask more questions. In 1915, after years of work, he presented his general theory of relativity, a new way to understand gravity, space, and time. It was revolutionary. He said that gravity wasn't just a force pulling things down. It was the result of space itself being curved by mass. At first, many scientists didn't believe him. His theory sounded too strange, too complex. But in 1919, during a solar eclipse, his predictions were proven true. The light of stars bent as it passed near the sun, exactly as Einstein had said. Overnight, he became a global icon. Fame didn't change Einstein much. He still played the violin in his spare time. He still walked to work, thinking quietly, lost in his thoughts. He still forgot where he put his papers, or even his socks. He wasn't a man of wealth or luxury. He cared more about ideas. When asked how he came up with his theories, he said, "I stay with the question longer." That was his secret: patience and imagination. He once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge tells you what is, but imagination shows you what could be." Einstein also used his fame to speak for peace. He hated war and violence. When Germany was taken over by the Nazis in the 1930s, Einstein left his homeland and moved to the United States. He became a professor at Princeton University, where he continued to work until his death. In his later years, Einstein's hair grew wilder, his clothes simpler, and his humor sharper. He received letters from children, students, and scientists from around the world. He answered many of them himself. When a young girl once wrote, saying she had trouble with math, Einstein replied, "Do not worry about your difficulty in mathematics. I can assure you mine are still greater." Even near the end of his life, he never stopped learning. He still carried notebooks filled with questions about the universe, questions no one could answer yet. On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away at the age of 76. But his curiosity, his ideas, and his spirit live on. He showed the world that genius isn't about grades or following rules. It's about never stopping your curiosity. Today, Einstein's name means genius. But the truth is, he was once a quiet boy who didn't talk, a student who got poor grades, a young man who couldn't find a job, and a dreamer who never stopped asking why. He once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning." And that's what he did. All his life. He asked, he wondered, he dreamed. And by doing that, he changed how humanity sees the universe. So, the next time you feel bored, confused, or lost, remember Albert Einstein, the boy who asked too many questions, and in doing so, discovered the answers to the stars. And that was the story of Albert Einstein. The boy who once seemed lazy, the student who was misunderstood, and the man who changed the world with his ideas. Remember, sometimes the people who ask the most questions are the ones who see the world differently. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to stay curious. Because every question you ask brings you one step closer to understanding the universe. See you in the next story.